Hey everyone. So there's been talk again of casting a woman as James Bond. And while I'm not here to debate representation or gender politics, I do want to say this. If you think James Bond is just a name, a brand, a vessel to be reimagined, then you've already lost the plot. Because Bond isn't a person, he's a myth. And today I want to explain why I think the Bond franchise is basically dead, and why no amount of reinvention is likely to revive it. The reason is simple. Bond is an unapologetic mythic masculine archetype in a world allergic to archetypes. We live in a culture that can no longer carry him with coherence or conviction. He doesn't align with the values of committee thinking, HR departments, and ontological insecurity around masculinity. Worse still, Bond is a Cold War era myth trying to breathe in a post-Cold War world. You can still create dramatic stakes, but you can't fake the cultural atmosphere that gave rise to him. The soul has left the structure. Let's begin with the best. Sean Connery. Connery's Bond walks through the world and simply is. No justification. No hand-wringing. The world might be teetering on nuclear annihilation, but we have an immovable figure in a tux, cutting through ambiguity with certainty, force, and charm. He anchors the uncertainty. These early Bond films weren't just movies, they were rituals. Connery walks into a room and the camera knows not to flinch. He's not just a character, he's a masculine symbol rendered in flesh, without apology, without compromise. In a world of shifting empires and moral ambiguity, Bond is the fixed point in a spinning compass. The ontology of James Bond, in other words, is clear. Pierce Brosnan's Bond also worked. The setting was post-Cold War, but the spirit wasn't yet post-Cold War. Cultural inertia still lingered. You could play the archetype without irony and the audience would still resonate. His Bond was polished, but not yet hollow. Craig's Bond? That's postmodern Bond. Every gesture is metatextual. Every choice is a negotiation with guilt, with empire, and with masculinity. M scolds him. The villain mocks him. The woman reforms him. He bleeds for it. Even the camera seems hesitant, like it's asking, is this still okay? Craig's Bond isn't just a return, it's a return with a raised eyebrow, a reluctant nod to the so-called patriarchal past, but always with a disapproving whisper in the frame. We know this is problematic, but... And that whisper becomes a choir by No Time to Die, a film I didn't even bother to watch, actually. Modern Bond films want to borrow the structural clarity of the masculine archetype, hero, mission, villain, victory, without endorsing the meaning behind it. They want Bond's spine, but not his soul, and that dissonance is profoundly felt. It's as if they're not critiquing Bond, they're critiquing the audience for still wanting Bond. Craig's Bond is a mirror of our cultural anxieties, not a guide through them. Even when he wins, it feels permitted rather than earned. You can feel the writers and marketing departments whispering behind the scenes. Make him strong, but not too strong. Vulnerable, but not whiny. Masculine, but updated. Gritty, but thoughtful. Too many chefs. Too many half-visions cobbled together. A Frankenstein Bond. Connery's Bond didn't care if you approved. He was a force of nature, not a response to culture. That's the difference between mythic presence and manufactured relevance. Connery's Bond just walks in and is. Craig's Bond is like a man built in a lab, but by people unsure if men should even be built anymore. And it's not that Cold War culture allowed Connery's Bond, it's that it needed him. The culture had an ambient hunger for clarity, decisiveness, and command. That's what made the lightning strike. Without that hunger, all you get is thunder without spark. Still unsure? Think about GoldenEye, for me the last true Bond film. There's a famous scene between Bond and the new M, played by Judi Dench, where she calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War. And for a brief moment, the impossible happens. They acknowledge the changing world without betraying the archetype. M calls him out. Brosnan doesn't flinch. He doesn't respond with guilt or sarcasm, but with presence. He knows who he is. He doesn't justify it. He embodies it. That silence, that restraint. It's dignified, actually, and M respects him for it. The scene doesn't deconstruct Bond. It tests him, and he holds up. Now, you can't create a heroic archetype without first issuing a disclaimer. That's fatal to Bond. If you can't lean into the mythic masculine, the cold competence, romantic authority, unshakable core, then the structure simply collapses. Craig's Bond tried to walk that line, but ended up apologizing for his own existence. Casino Royale is well executed, taut, even gripping, but it doesn't feel like Bond in its soul. No glamour, no mythic silhouette, no world that moves to a rhythm that only Bond can hear. He's not a shark gliding through current, he's an instrument of violence in need of fine-tuning. Skyfall. There is soul in it, legacy, shadows, but it's soul drenched in self-consciousness. The tone is funerary. It's not asking who is Bond, it's actually writing his eulogy. In Skyfall, Q becomes a snide, know-it-all millennial rebuttal to tradition, and becomes a Freudian projection, actually referred to as mom. A strange maternalization of the masculine, as if Bond's competence must be nursed into acceptability, and it doesn't land. By Spectre and No Time to Die, Bond is surrounded by bureaucracy, doubt, and ideology. He's not a fixed point anymore. He's a liability to be managed. The myth collapses under its own reflection. It all reminds me of Chapter 38 of the Tao Te Ching. When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Let's apply that to Bond. Connery is the Tao. Bond just is. There's no self-awareness, no performance, no apology. He acts, and his very presence holds the world together. There's no attempt to define or justify Bond. He emerges from the culture as a natural force. This is Tao without name. Brosnan, especially in GoldenEye, is goodness. The Tao is fading, but echoes remain. He still moves with ease, still fits the suit, still delivers the line, but it's beginning to notice that it's constructing Bond. Craig is morality. Bond must now be explained, justified, and redeemed. Each film is a moral commentary. We get pain, consequence, trauma, doubt. Bond doesn't just act, he's interrogated. He bleeds for his right to exist, and even then the films aren't sure he should. What's next, of course, will be ritual, if it isn't already. Bond will become costume and choreography. An empty movie filled with callbacks, product placement, and hollow gestures. A world where James Bond can sip the martini, drive the Aston Martin, wear the tuxedo. But the presence is gone. All signal, no source. A hollow echo of what once was. Performing masculinity instead of embodying it. We're not watching a myth, we're watching the fear of one. So no, I didn't watch No Time to Die. And no, I won't be watching Bond the Reinvention. Because the truth is simple. If you have to explain, apologize for, or deconstruct the myth to make it palatable, it isn't myth anymore. Bond didn't survive because he was a man with a gun. He survived because he was a fixed point in a spinning world, a symbol of clarity, poise, and unshakable core. That's what the culture no longer knows how to hold. And once the Tao is gone, all that remains is ritual.